It's not that God hasn't put the way to life eternal there for us, both to find and to understand just from experience. I mean, just if we take experience for a moment, you experience good things, gratitude would lead you to thank the possibility of God for such good things. In other words, gratitude might naturally grow and lead you to heaven. But equally, if we take the possibility of God, well, if there's only one God, then there's the Hebrew view, which is the name of God is Yahweh, which basically means, well, it's a combination of God, the word Yah, and Hava, something to do with praise. If you praise something, you value it. If you focus on value, you're coming to God, because what you value is what your God is. And if you're devoted to that, that's your only God, then the very name of God in Hebrew directs you towards salvation, because you're focusing on praise as an activity. You know, the only way to God is through praise. Yahweh, Jehovah. If you want the anglicized version. If, on the other hand, you're in a culture that has many gods, well, in a sense, each god represents something you value. So, if you're worshipping the more comprehensive group of gods, you're individually focusing on a value with each god, then the more you have an overall picture, a pathway to the overall grasp of what you value. In other words, to worship a god would bring you to life eternal. Whether it was one god, like the Hebrew god, or many gods, like, say, Hinduism, where each god represents something of value. And you will tend to emphasize whichever gods your values are, and find out accordingly, because you then live accordingly, and you find out the consequence of following such, and adjust which gods you're valuing according to your experience. Just as an aside, I'm using a new phone here. I've been had to switch phones because the screen stopped working on the other phone. Miraculously, I was able to save even the recordings. I say miraculously because wasn't even clear I could keep or find and transfer the numbers from my old phone. And the chap in the shop was most helpful and managed that, and my daughter remembered an access number which we needed, and then I was in a situation where I hadn't got access to, in particular, the recordings, and some of the recordings I'd not transferred to my computer, so I could have lost them if I can't transfer them out of a dead phone. But the phone wasn't completely dead. That was the first great advantage. It was still obviously, for instance, receiving messages that there's a call for me and text, but I couldn't access it because I couldn't access the screen. But it then occurred to me that I could plug it into the computer and access it that way, and so I simply copied the recordings off and any other data that was on the phone, on the computer, onto some files there, and all is saved. Nothing is lost as far as I can see. Got everything I need. I felt that was an absolute wonderful outcome. Thank you, Dad. But enough to say that this recording might be a bit disjointed in that I'm not used to the new phone yet. Thank you, Dad. Yes, well, to return to the purpose of this recording, and not only that, the only thing we're asked to do is, well, we're sent. What are we sent to do? Well, tell people the way to eternal life. We tell it in our way. I'm doing it by recordings on YouTube. It's something that is there in one form or another already. All sorts of people have recorded on YouTube. I'm recording in my unique way, just as they are. And each of us is therefore furnishing yet another way to come to God. So that in all there are an incredible number of helps and guidances by God to come to life eternal. Isn't that wonderful? I'm going to say it again. We're not only able to come to God by simply natural response, thankfulness, gratitude, but by our notions of God, our hopes, if you like, our imagination of God, that He's a good God and that He's of the following good character. And therefore we're drawn to emphasize what we value about Him, to worship accordingly, to love, to be thankful. And equally, it's there in the names of the gods of our religions. You'll emphasize automatically those gods, or the God that personifies what you value. And you're encouraged then in that pursuit to worship and focus on, you see. You see, to worship is to practice. To love is to be. Loving kindness is to both practice what we are being in loving. And not only that, but the only thing we are asked to do is to add our unique contribution to helping others come to life eternal. Your way of the way you're sent into the world, your world, to help in your way those around us so that each of us is engaged by God, our Heavenly Father, so to speak, in his creative purpose. Even we contribute yet another way of rescuing people to life eternal. That's the only thing we're told we have to do. We're sent. We're not actually, well, in the Jesus story we're sent to heal the sick and raise the dead and this, that and the other. We just know we're sent and we do what we can do. And the more we are on the path to life eternal, the more we're able to take part in this creativity of helping others. You may be healing the sick and raising the dead, or you may just be encouraging people to do what is right. You may be clear as to what will help them most as you understand it. You know, my understanding is encourage them to be thankful. Take care of themselves. Don't take enormous changes, minor changes in the right direction, so you don't have too much uncertainty. Thank you, Dad. You see, it's as if everyone is actually on the path to God. Even what you might take as the most, well, in traditional terms, the most wicked of people. He's doing what he thinks he values. And in doing it and practicing it, he's finding out the consequences. And he adjusts what he values accordingly. Doesn't do those things that hurts himself, for instance. In fact, if you think of it, whenever we hurt others, creatures or whatever, it reverts back in the end to hurting ourselves. Because our greater self turns on a harmonious relationship with others, and if we're wrecking that harmony of their life, we wreck our own. It feeds back into us. So God has made the creation quite wonderfully. Self-balancing or motivated towards life eternal for each of its individuals. And by the creation, I think I mean specifically this universe of uncertainty. Time, space, matter, change, uncertainty and so on. Uncertainties. Thank you, Dad. I'll just try to note then that when I say each person gives their own contribution, they give an influence. You know, whenever we speak, we try to influence someone. I don't mean badly or goodly, we just try to influence. And we put the possibility there, you see. People can run with it or resist it and so forth. And those that run with what we say are those that value, in some sense, what we're saying. And then their experience of life yields to them accordingly some return, good or bad, and they adjust what they value accordingly to their experience. So we are actually all sent, whether we know it or not. We're not all purposed in some perfect way by any means. But in the Jesus story, those that are purposed appropriately from the Jesus point of view are encouraged to be sent to influence others. And those that have not been so encouraged, sent, don't realize that they're sent anyway, that every time they open their mouth, or in this case they record something, they attempt to influence others, and others will hear or not hear according to their value system. And if they do hear, they'll be helped in that they'll now focus more on what they value and find out the consequence by their subsequent behavior that's influenced by such. So in some sense, everyone, all creatures are teaching us all the time. We're being taught by our experience in the world. And if you feel sent to influence others, you're perhaps more aware of doing this. And more focused on influencing them according to your values. Do you see, I'm also saying that all people worship God. Their God may not be a personification of what they value, but all persons value what they value. Now, they may be kept from practicing such by other people's view of God. In other words, by being worshippers of, in some degree or other, gods that are not their God, that don't personify what they truly value. And of course, all we learn is by such that this God doesn't suit our needs, doesn't suit our values. And we are unhappy with the God we are worshipping because it's not the God we truly love and value. So we're alienated from the religion that we are practicing because we're practicing the wrong religion. We know that already. So you should love your God, your God, your personification of, well, not even your personification, but you should follow your values and find out the consequences. This doesn't mean you're not influenced by good advice. On the contrary, you will listen to the advice that appeals to you, and that will probably be emphasizing what your values already are. And you'll tend to ignore other advice, even though the religion you've adopted is giving you that advice every day. It will still grate with you as not being what you value. So, you're to love your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength, and your God may not be actually personified as such yet, although that will be most helpful if you do. It will be most efficient, put it that way. You'll find out more quickly the more you focus on your God, and the more you actually personify him as such, because we relate to people. Of all things, we are relating to people. We relate from the very beginning of birth, don't we? You know, we find mum, if you like. So people that are not religious are nonetheless still following their God, in the sense that God is their value system. Not personified yet, but it is their values, and they may be diverted or kept at some distance from doing this by the religion they are occupied in following. Might even be forced on them by their society, mightn't it? Or it may be something they feel they should be doing, even though it's a bit alien to their values. So that's a great hindrance. Being in the wrong place, being with the wrong people. In other words, being in situations where your values are not easily practiced is not good for you. So you practice what your values are, and you find out the consequences, and you change your values accordingly, and you come automatically towards God. You are held up by practices that are forced upon you that you know already are contrary to what you truly value. So in my case, I was attending a morning meeting 5 days a week in a church, in an environment, prayer meeting come worship, where much of the teaching was contrary to what I truly value. It was what's called Christian fundamentalism, which is very dogmatic, very narrow, very inflexible, very rejecting of everything else. And I needed to escape from that. God had me thrown out of the church. Well, that was good. I didn't really think so at the time, but I thought, I don't know what God's doing. I'm going to thank you for it, God. Heavenly Father, thank you, Dad. And I let it happen. And it's a great blessing. Don't give yourselves environments that are contrary to what you value. Will hold you up. Choose the environments that help you the best. Don't get me wrong, it was helping me greatly. I so loved the worship. Didn't love the teaching. Certainly loved many of the people there. It was the best thing at the time, but times change. You graduate to the next lesson. Don't resist changes that are so helpful to you. Bless you. Thank you, Dad. Well, let me be clearer. What I'm saying is that each person, by their very speech, every person wants to influence another. And they influence according to their values. That's what causes them to speak. And these influences are accepted or rejected by others. If they're accepted, then they take them on as part of their experience. It influences how they live, and their living yields them the fruits accordingly. If the fruits are bitter, they change and shift from what they value to something else. If they are good and sweet, they continue in them, devote themselves more and more to such. Let me take what you might think is an absurdity, a devotion to, say, football, some sport. Takes your free time, your interest, brings joy. For a while, at least a while. And after a while you may find that no longer really interests you. It doesn't bring joy after all. It doesn't grab you any longer. Do you see your God starts to shift away from that which you find not to be a blessing after all? Then you take up something else. Now there are long, extremely long routes to coming to God that would take 1,000,000 lives, more. And there are also very short, efficient ways to God. And the shortest I know of, which is open to just about all conscious beings, is to practice seeking that which is good and lovely, that you value, and thanking God for it. Your God, not someone else's. Thankful to your understanding of God, which might not even be a person. It might be some benevolence of the universe, for want of a better phrase. But it's a good enough phrase, that's the point. For you to feel gratitude. For it is gratitude that transforms you at an incredibly fast rate, changes your whole life into something wonderful. Taste and see, you'll find out. Practice thankfulness. Speak it out loud to yourself. Be in the habit of looking all the time for that which is good. In other words, the complete reverse to what especially the modern world seems to generate, which is an extraordinary ability to see what's wrong with everything. You, on the contrary, are pursuing seeing what's right, probably with everything as time goes on. And the joy and the blessing, the peace, the understanding, the goodness and the fullness of life that flows from such is bewilderingly wonderful. Bless you. Welcome to Life Eternal. You are for certain a member of the League of Gratitude. Bless you. Thank you, Dad, for setting up a universe like this to the benefit and blessing of us all.